Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Media Show. I'm your host, Nick Palavita, and today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic. It's the slap that was heard round the world, which is at the Oscars. Well, let's bring our panelists in today. This person actually is a professor emeritus at State University of New York in Albany, the co-author of the book The Millionaire Next Door, and co-author of book Richer Than a Millionaire. Let's bring in the Honorable Bill Denko. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nick.
This is definitely a marketing media issue, which I'm not really sure about. So with that, let's bring another marketing media guru. He's the CEO of the Esports Network with Reuters, hailing out of the area of Texas. Let's bring in Mark Themig. Mark, welcome to the show. Brave souls you are to discuss such a topic, which I'm still not really sure about this. And this was the slap heard around the world, dealing with I don't know. Did you guys even see it? This was on the Oscars, where Will Smith went up to Chris Rock and slapped him because he was apparently making a joke about his spouse. I don't know. What are your thoughts about this? I'll go with Bill Denko. Let's hear what you have to say.
I didn't see it live, but I saw it on news clips numerous times. I think it's genuine. I think it's a reflection of the general coarsening in our society. That a slight, I mean, as vulgar as it might be to make a joke, but Chris Rock is a comedian, of course. But as vulgar as it was to make a joke about Will Smith's wife's hair, I don't think violence is the answer. But it's a reflection of how our society is proceeding, in my view. You know, you just can't bear any of these slights. They have to be responded to with physical violence.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's real.
Yeah, and you think it was real, wasn't staged, because there was one YouTube video was going, well, this is all staged and made up, and I'm not sure about that. Mark Themig, what is your thoughts on this slap heard around the world?
Well, I think Will Smith has been around a long time, and he's been involved in a lot of movies and a lot of activities. And I think while it was probably an inappropriate joke, it was from a comedian. I don't think that the comedian meant any harm to his wife. And I think probably he had other ways of addressing the issue without literally going up on the stage and physically slapping the guy. I think he could have addressed the issue in other ways.
Right.
He certainly had a very substantial media presence, so he could have spoken about this to the media and expressed himself as how he felt this was such inappropriate humor at the expense of another person's medical condition. I think he had a lot of options, and he obviously, flipped at the moment and really didn't control himself, which is surprising because he's a person that can be is very much in control. So, just my thoughts.
Okay. Mark Lee, you've been in broadcasting for 100 years, plus or minus. So you've seen a lot of this stuff, but and the Oscars, there was one YouTube video saying this was fake. It's to bring up the ratings of Oscars, and that this was all completely staged. First of all, do you think this was staged, or do you think this was the real deal, the real McCoy Mark?
When it first happened, I was actually thinking it was staged because, as we know, the Oscars were having some serious rating problems and they were having some serious other issues that they wanted to get around and all of that. But as I've talked to more and more people, I actually do think that the slap took place. Now, whether it was a staged act gone array. That I'm still not 100% sure of, and I still have some questions about that. Actually, I'm hoping we can get in touch with somebody that we know that has direct connections to the Oscars, because we are actually talking about that on his show, because Jacoby's sister, Janora, was actually one of the announcers on the show when it was taking place. So she was actually doing some of the announcements that you were hearing during the show and all along those lines. So I know that he has given me the impression in conversations with him that it was not fake and that it actually did happen. Like I said, I still have some speculations about what was going on and the reasons that it might have been going on as well. But definitely it has become the talk of the internet. It has definitely become the talk. As y'all know, I'm active in Clubhouse, and it's become the talk on there, even in rooms that you wouldn't expect it to be the talk of. And it has definitely pushed some other issues down to the lower end of the register in terms of their attention, because a lot of people were paying more attention to this than other things. And as I have said on a couple of shows, and then I'll just kind of like settle into the rest of the conversation after I bring this up, is unfortunately when these kind of incidents happen, it sometimes distracts from other major accomplishments that took place during that time. I mean, I think this was the first time that an African American and a part of the majority or a large portion of their team was doing the production. That is now gone by the wayside. So people aren't talking about Mr. Packard, who was the person that actually was in that space. There was a young lady from Raleigh that was the first person of color to win, and is also part of the LGBTIQ community. And she won because of her role in West Side Story. There was a whole Cobra movie that was talking about the deaf and others in the disabled community. And a lot of those conversations have now gone by the wayside because this took over the majority of people's thoughts and things along those lines. So by the time we actually get back to hearing who won at the Oscars, a lot of those things may not even be relevant anymore, or they will not have the kind of relevance that they should have had if they had been caught up in not having that particular moment of infamy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go to Bill Denko on this one. When does, because we have this First Amendment free speech that in other words, you can say what you want, and Chris Rock is an entertainer and he lives on the edge of comedy, which there are a lot of people that do that. Mm-hmm. At what point in time does comedy become bullying, basically? In other words, the thing is, it's no longer comedy, it's really something in bad taste. And who makes these determinations, Bill? So I'm gonna give you that. You're a professor. I'll throw the hard ball at you. In other words, well, this is a hard one. Who makes that determination? When do you cross the line?
I haven't been watching Saturday Night Live all that often, but certainly during the Trump administration, every single opening monologue was or skit was about how bad the president was, and it just got kind of tiresome. But they had this hour and a half, whatever length is, to just express their opinions without any chance for rebuttal. So it's just the way comedy works. I mean, if you have the microphone and the platform, and you don't have to give anybody a chance to get their own opinion in, buy your own airtime and do your own opinion, right? So it is a First Amendment thing. I mean, I didn't like what Saturday Night Live was doing.
Right.
I don't particularly like what Will Smith did, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but did Chris Rock make a mistake by crossing the line? In other words, once you start making fun of somebody's physical infirmities, did you cross the line?
You know what? He quickly said he had no idea that she had alopecia. I mean, I had no idea. I'm sure it was in People magazine at one time. I don't read People magazine, but maybe he legitimately did not know. And maybe it was a spontaneous joke of looking out in the audience of, I have said in the classroom some things that I regret just based on a physical appearance. I said, geez, I can get in trouble doing that.
Right.
And I think nowadays, had I been in the classroom nowadays, I definitely would be in trouble.
Right. Yeah. Because the classrooms have changed a lot.
Yeah, they certainly have. They certainly have. So yeah, but I agree with you. Yeah, trying not to talk about other people's physical appearances or values.
I guess I said something wrong. Maybe it's the Russians are taking over our network.
The Russians are eating you again?
Well, every time there's a bleep, I'm going, maybe the Russians are invading our network.
Was I bleeped out on something?
Yeah, this whole thing got bleeped out for just a minute. And I'm going, I
Oh.
wonder what's going on. We're back. But the thing is, sometimes when I see the bleep, I do know there's cybersecurity issues that are going on worldwide right now. So who knows what's happening?
Maybe it's sunspots.
Yeah, it might be some sort of hot
Could
spot.
be a sunspot, but I was actually, and there's so many times that you can't really know what's going on. I mean, I've done videos and I've done things where I've brought in different things that are live productions, and somebody may use the F word, or they may have some music that is somewhat questionable, and then it becomes a question of, do you bleep that out or do you let it stay in there, and particularly if it's in a setting and all of that. Like I said, we've been fortunate enough to air some stuff. As a matter of fact, I just had an incident yesterday, which you'll find interesting, Nick, because we actually aired part of it on the networks, and I was given permission to do that. But we actually aired a play. I think we might have only missed 5 minutes of the play, and it's called Death Cochise, and we aired that on Saturday, and it was aired on the network, and it went live on the network minus that 5 minutes. But there is a scene in there where there's the sound of a gunshot. So definitely, I know that was even raised at the institution, which is one of the places I work at, because somebody came to me afterwards and they were like, if y'all continue to do this show, which I passed on to the director, can you give a warning, like a warning that there could be this sudden action and everything, because people can be very sensitive to that and all along those lines. But Mark Themick, I know that a lot of times that also happens in video games. I can
no kidding.
Video games where there's a gunshot in the middle of it and everything. So, and I know some of them have warnings, but some of them don't always have those warnings. So what are your thoughts when people want to have warnings put on things? We don't know. Maybe there should have been a warning put on Chris, but what are your thoughts when people want a warning? Like I said, this was just a conversation I had with a young lady came to me, and she was there with a group of students, and I think maybe one of the students had complained because they probably lived in a neighborhood that has those kind of sounds, so it could have been what they call a trigger warning. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts when people want to see trigger warnings on performances or just in things in general?
Well, in video games, there's an awful lot of gunshots fired, depending on what games you're playing. Call of Duty, if you're afraid of gunshots in the background, you better switch off that one. But, gaming and esports, because it's global and because it's dominated as a percentage by younger people, there is a lot of inappropriate language spoken in games, and it's literally part of the dialogue of a lot of young people to use words that, when you get older in life, you feel are totally unnecessary to express yourself. You don't need to use the F word to express yourself. There's lots of other words, and maybe as you get a little older and you get a little more depth in your vocabulary, you have more to call on. So I think there's also a problem, that if you dig deeper into all of this, it's really called conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we look at a lot of communities and a lot of cultures, and Mark, I don't want to speak in a manner that I'd love to hear your opinion, but I know that in many cases, when I was involved in charter schools in the urban inner city of Cleveland, and our schools were predominantly African American and a 98% free lunch, a lot of the challenges and problems that young people have resulted in a lack of upbringing with an effective problem resolution or conflict resolution in the home. They just were not taught how to resolve things without being verbally violent or physically violent. It was prevalent in a lot of homes, and I think with the fact that we're also seeing a continuing activity with respect to divorce, where we now don't have a mother and a father living together in a mutual harmony. We're also not seeing homes that know how to teach children conflict resolution. So I think we're suffering from a lot of things right now. I was kind of excited, and I want to just bring this one up to read this morning, that Elon Musk bought 9.2% of Twitter.
I saw that. Yeah.
Wow.
I thought was fascinating. And then also I thought was fascinating, the New York City mayor is now requiring all his department heads to funnel all their communications through him because he feels that it's a media gotcha environment that he's working in. So there's really a lot of very interesting things going on, and the way people are solving these conflicts is fascinating to me. But it's all over the board, and I also think that violence is not the way, and obviously the war in Ukraine is another example of conflict resolution being outside of the wire, so to speak. So
I agree with you. And conflict resolution can be an issue, but it's not just a minority issue. I think that it's part of the reason that we have the divorce rate that we do in the United States, because I don't know that we do a good job of the communication or even discussing conflicts on a regular basis, including conflicts within our own homes, not just within our own societies and all along those lines. Because I definitely think that communications is something that, unfortunately, coming back to one of Nick's favorite topics, we don't do a good job of teaching people how to deal with conflict resolutions, even in the school system and things along those lines. And actually, one of these days, I might even sneak my brother into one of these particular shows, because that is actually what his degree is in conflict resolution. He's actually getting a PhD in that and all along those lines. So I do know that I learned a lot about it through him and his interaction with my nephews and just his interactions and some of the things that he has shared with me on his dissertation papers. Because a lot of times we also, within the conflict resolutions, we accept things a little bit too much and we don't necessarily call people on them. And that comes down to when we allow people to use certain derogatory terms in workplaces, and that could be against a religion, it could be against a race, it could be against an ethnicity, it can even be against an orientation, without calling people on those. And then it's also been interesting, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this, how certain groups have used that to reclaim, or if it's a word that is bad, they will use it and try to find a way to reclaim it and put it in a different light. You use the word that a lot of people use in the that community that is LGBTIQ and everything, which is gay. That had a whole different meaning at one point and another. And then folks within that community kind of used it and found a way to reclaim it. And there's a certain word that deals with a lady dog and all of that. And I know that some of the feminists have found a way to reclaim that. I know that even one of our founders has joked about that, and when she uses it to rhyme with the word of witch, because it's a word that goes with that as well. And there was a very popular play that was done in the African American community along those lines, and it had to do with ageism, it had to do with racism, but it also had to do with a number of other things. And that was the play that Marianne Alda did, that was called, menopause is that word that I'm alluding to and everything, and I'm going to wrestle that word down to the ground. So that's the way that she tried to reclaim it and all of that. So it is interesting when you find people that will try to find a way to reclaim some of these negative spaces and these negative words.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, you brought up a really good point, both you guys, but this deal with conflict resolution not only exists between Will Smith and Chris Rock, but also is in the Ukraine right now.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you ask, what is this war really about? It has not been communicated very well in terms of, I know he put a lot of people on the border, he invaded Ukraine, but Putin didn't state his case very well. And it seems to me that the conflict could have been resolved in another fashion rather than sending troops to the Ukraine. In other words, that was very poor conflict resolution. And somewhere along the lines, Will Smith, the conflict that he had, because making fun of somebody's disability may be crossing the line if there is a line of free speech. But there's also a thing called anger management. Apparently, Will Smith needs to go into an anger management course, because all of a sudden it just really got to him. And my guess is this isn't the first time. I bet if you went to this guy's history, he probably has some other issues.
No, there have been some cases.
Yeah.
There's actually been conversations around some of his anger management issues. I think that after the slap, there were some people that were even talking about some of the things that went on various sets that he was involved in and things of that nature. And it even comes back to that whole trigger notion, because, you know, a lot of times it just takes one trigger to set a person off. I mean, we can even look at some of the folks that have created some very horrible acts, even like to the point of mass murders and things of that nature. But sometimes it was just one little trigger that finally was the capping point that set them off in whatever they did and everything. So a lot of times it's just a build up and everything. And then at some point, something might be the thing that finally hits your trigger and gets you to go totally off. And we do know that there have been cases of people harming themselves and or harming others because they were just reaching that boiling point. That's the word I was looking for. They're reaching that boiling point. As soon as that boiling point hits, then they explode and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the reason why people thought it was fake was this. Last year's ratings for the Oscars were the worst ever. Mm-hmm. In other words, they're losing a lot of ground. And one way to make up ground is to pull a stunt like that. In other words, you pull a stunt like that, and now it's just being talked about in every circle. Bill, you didn't see it, but do you think this was real, or is this a stage for the Oscar? What is your thoughts? Because I'm serious. If you looked at the ratings a year ago, they were tanked. The Oscars, it was over. No one was watching it. And then all of a sudden, just with one incident, all of a sudden it just pushes up to like the number one issue in media and social media. So do you think this was fake, or was this real?
Well, they needed help with the ratings, that's for sure. But I still do believe it was real. I mean, this comes under the category of like road rage. I mean, what sets somebody off? There's some trigger, and you can get killed in road rage.
Right.
It's we have a general coarsening in society. That's my real problem here. I got to reflect on a gospel from John that was actually used yesterday. And it was about the prostitute who was going to be stoned. And actually the homily that the priest used was, he without sin, cast the first stone. Who's going to condemn this woman? Therefore, I don't condemn you. You're free to go and sin no more. Well, that's the kind of attitude we have to have in conflict resolution. We really do. We have to absorb some of these issues and say, why do we have to react with with tit for a tat? You say something, I have to hit you. It's a very vulgar way of having a civilized society. It corrupts it.
I hear you, Bill. And there's a type of journalism, a type of comedy that I'm actually a big fan of and everything. But, one person's version of that might be another person's insult. But I am actually a fan and have been ever since the Doonesbury era and Bloom County of this form of comedy called sarcasm. And definitely, I know that a lot of people don't even know how to define it, sarcasm, because some people take it as a little bit too serious and they feel that the person is actually making a direct attack on them. But I think that both Doonesbury and Bloom County from the cartoon world, and I could name some others from the movie world, were masters of sarcasm. But it kind of even comes down to when people try to define forms of music, because that's one of my favorite quotes is there was a great jazz legend and somebody asked him how to define jazz, and he was like, I just wanted to be known as good music. He didn't want it to be defined in a certain kind of a way. And I think that that's the same with sarcasm. One man's sarcasm might be another man's insult. So it's a hard thing to define as to what is sarcasm and what is not. But I do know that I even see some sarcasm in the video games. So I was wondering your thoughts about that, Mark, because I do know that sometimes in those storylines that are in there can be some sarcastic storylines within them, whether it's dealing with gender, race, or just the whole Mother Nature kind of thing. Because I've also seen some sarcastic plots within Mother Nature. But I'd love to know your thoughts about sarcasm in the game industry.
Well, Mark, I think you bring up a great point. One of the things to know about video games is at the heart of video game is it's all about entertainment. And when we look at many forms of entertainment, the most effective forms of entertainment are over the top kind of activities.
Mhm.
And when you look at video games, even when you look at how the male characters are crafted and how the women characters, I can define woman, by the way, so I'm good with that now. So how the women characters or girl characters are depicted are all over the top, whether it's muscles or breasts or or figures or whatever. So there's a constant use of sarcasm and other forms of pushing in a direction to get a reaction. And I think that's what, to some extent, when you look at entertainers like, and I say entertainers, like some of the people that we hear, Howard Stern, for example. I was always curious, and I sat down and thought about what is the incredible lure about Howard Stern, and I think for a lot of people it was they're just not really even knowing what this guy was going to say next, and you almost were plugged in just because the stuff he would say was so incredibly off the wall and extreme at times that you were drawn to want to listen to that. But I think really kind of keeping in tune with Nick, what you brought to us today. I really do think we are, and also Bill talked about it, is we are struggling, whether Republican, Democrat, or in between, with this inability to solve conflicts between us. I do think we're also being taught a lot of bad lessons by a lot of so-called news commentators on the major networks. They have a tendency to say outrageous things at times to drive ratings, and that teaches people things. Sooner or later, people start to take on those characteristics or decide that that's how they're going to communicate. And so I think I think a lot of people who are in media don't appreciate, and even some comedians may not appreciate, how powerful and impactful their words, behavior, actions, extreme comments, how they can affect people's lives and teach them, anything but conflict resolution.
And speaking of conflict resolution, as I was just thinking about that and hearing what you were saying, one of the things that I was thinking about is how oftentimes we were talking about comedy and the power of comedy and even what happened with Will and everything. But historically, the comedian would oftentimes be the one that had the most power because he could do exactly what Mark Themick just said. He could say the things that people wanted to say out loud, but they were not, for whatever reasons, allowed to. But because comedy has a little bit more breadth, they were able to get away with things that the common man couldn't have said, even if it was something that they were thinking. I mean, I think about some of the redneck and racist things that Archie Bunker said, if you want to go back in time, thinking about All in the Family or some of the characters of the Dukes of Hazzard and things along those lines. And I'd love to hear Bill's thoughts about this, because definitely we do know that if we go to royal history and all of that, probably one of the most powerful people out there was the court jester, because the court jester could get away with a lot of things that the common man couldn't do. Now, if they went too far over the line, there might have been some serious punishments, including losing their head. And I mean that literally and everything. Mm-hmm. But there was ways that they could get away with saying things that the common man could not, but they had to walk a very thin line in that sense. But I was just wondering your thoughts along those lines.
Yeah. I've been watching some reruns of Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. I said, "Holy smoke! There's no way those are from the 1990s. These reruns. There's no way the topics that they're doing and the situations they're creating could be allowed in Hollywood today. They just wouldn't. I mean, but it's amazing. Same thing with Archie Bunker. There's no way that could be created today." But you know what? we do have this sensitivity. If you look at the university system, in fact, there was one case, Hastings Law School in California, a couple of weeks ago. A speaker basically was shouted down, and there was no free discourse of opinions. And of course, the defense of the students who were shouting him down and disrupting was, well, they're just exercising their First Amendment right. Well, it's a bit absurd to say you can just cancel somebody without having a discussion. There has to be some sort of civility. And that's one thing I think we're lacking here. We're saying that, well, it's First Amendment, I can do it, and therefore it trumps everything, which I think is, not the right way to go. There has to be some limitation on it.
And speaking of limitations, and I hope you don't mind me just kind of veering slightly, but it came back to something that I think Mark Thimick brought up in everything earlier. And I was just curious, within our conversation, are people worried at all about certain people that are in the power structure having too much control over our social media? Because I think you mentioned that Elon Musk has bought roughly 10% of Twitter. We know that a lot of people are all excited about the metaverse and going into the metaverse, and that is actually Facebook's new name. So some people are meaning Meta. So some folks are wondering if that doesn't mean that Facebook will have more weight in that whole space than others might have in terms of weight and all of that. And we do know that not that long ago, Facebook bought Instagram. I'm still trying to figure out why they won't make an Instagram a destination on StreamYard. StreamYard, if you're listening, we need Instagram as a destination site. Y'all own them. Y'all let Facebook go. So if Facebook is a destination site, we need Instagram as well. That was my personal message to the people at StreamYard to add Instagram to the site and all of that. But what are your thoughts about some of these executives and big time executives, some of the people that are in the power class, for lack of a better term, being in charge of our social media at this kind of level? 10% is a pretty decent amount.
Yeah, well, I think what I find interesting about Elon Musk is, first of all, I personally think that that's a great move on his part. He also made $700 million on that move because once they announced his investment, the stock went up 10 bucks. It had gone down before that when he mentioned that he was considering his own platform. So I don't know that he tactically decided that, but anyway, he benefited from that investment. But I think he clearly is injecting himself into an organization that has leaned in one way too far. And I think whenever we have social communication, social media organizations start to move in one direction too extreme, I kind of call it the pendulum theory. You go one way too far, it's eventually going to reach a point, it's going to swing back the other. And these things can take years before they do. But I think it's a very, very interesting development. And obviously, having another voice in there. And by the way, Musk is not a Republican.
Right.
He's a centrist more than anything. But I think he's a logical, fair-minded, honest person from what I've seen and heard about him. And he's a very brilliant man. So I like to see that kind of activity go on to sort of hold people accountable when they start to go too far and too extremes. And
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Hey, Nick, I was wondering, can we sue Elon Musk? Because apparently he asked his Twitter followers on Saturday if he should sell 10% of his company's stock, and the poll received more than 3.5 million votes. So I'm personally claiming that he sold the idea from me. So
he possibly did. But see, one thing you learn, Machiavelli, you don't attack people that are stronger than you.
That's
okay, it's not a good idea. So the thing is, when you got a guy who's got 200 billion, he's usually not a good defendant in a lawsuit that is borderline. But what we have seen in media is the takeover. Like I said, that in the 70s we had 50% we had 50 outlets that were owned by like 50 companies. They were very diverse media. Today we have 5 companies own 90%. It's really shrunk. LinkedIn, who we broadcast through, this is going through LinkedIn, through all their channels right now. It's owned by Microsoft.
Yes.
And so what you find out is that the media is really contracted. CBS is owned by Viacom, which also owns the Smithsonian Channel. It also owns the Weather Channel. Viacom owns a lot of channels. Disney owns ABC. Disney owns Disney Channel. And it didn't surprise me, which we predicted, that Apple would eventually get into television, which they did. They did Apple TV, and Amazon got into basically television, Amazon Prime. And now Amazon's looking to create their own international TV channel. I don't know if you know that. But
speaking of
they're
folks
advertising their international TV channel. I think it's funny. Now, we're already in international because, like I said, we broadcast to about 122 countries, but we're not owned by anybody, which is very strange because a lot of...
Let's keep it that way and everything.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Let's keep it that way. But there was another person that was trying to start his own social media and everything, and apparently he's run into trouble because I just saw an article today that the former president was trying to start Truth Social, and apparently some top executives have quit, including his chief technology officer Josh Adams and Billy Boozer. So they have left, and the head of the company's product development and chief legal officer Lori Heyer Bettner are also apparently going as well. So looks like he's got some folks that are bailing. Maybe they're not getting as much traction as he thought he was going to get, or maybe he ran into my friend Truso, which is doing another kind of social media thing and has a similar name and all of that. I don't know, but definitely it looks like he's not having the kind of success he wanted, or at least the staffers aren't. So they exited out the door.
Yeah, I think what the real problem is, because as I've been reading up on our friend Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and then I finally I never saw the movie. There's a movie called The Social Network. Mm-hmm. Definitely worth seeing. Okay. And I just hypothesized without seeing that the reason he beat MySpace is he worked at it. He went and distributed his content to all these different sites. That was my hypothesis. Now watching the movie for the first time, he actually did do that. He actually took his Facebook and distributed it through all the colleges and universities. In other words, he was out there pushing distribution, where MySpace, which was owned by Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal, well, we're owned by the Wall Street Journal. And corporate America does this. They pump their chest. Oh, we're great and wonderful. And then they sit back and say, because we're great and wonderful, we don't have to do anything. But he got killed.
I was gonna say on Facebook there's one other thing, having read the past and the founding of it, that Mark Zuckerberg did, which probably would not have been done, but if he had sold it along the way to a major corporation, he opened the platform to developers.
Oh, right.
And that created literally thousands of opportunities for modification and improvement at a rate of speed that no one could match. You couldn't manpower it enough or cover the cost of what he did. So by him literally opening the platform for developers to do what they wanted with it and have that control, because he had a hacker mentality and a hacker sort of model, that would not have been the model that a major corporation would have had. And had several opportunities, including Viacom and Steve Ballmer from Microsoft and so on, to sell that company along the way. He kept refusing to do it because he had a bigger vision.
Yeah, well, I've worked with corporate America. They're really, I guess you have because you work with Reuters, but I do it through my financial services company that we manage these pensions all over the country, world, really, actually all over the United States, because our laws don't allow us to do it all over the world. But working with Principal Financial, One America, and this is a $500 billion company, $70 billion company. They move like this. They move very methodically. And if you want to be innovative, good luck, because the thing is they squash innovation because they like doing things the way they've always done things.
Speaking of squashing innovation, are you ready to sell us for like $3 billion? Because apparently this recently happened because Kevin Meyer, who said he's going to continue to work with Will Smith and everything, but he is the co-CEO of a Blackstone group named Candle Media, and he discussed their company's 360 IP investment strategy at a recent conference in Cannes. But he was appearing alongside another entertainment co-founder because apparently his media just purchased children-focused brand Moonbug last year for $3 billion. So they had previously bought Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine for $900 million, and they also own a stake in Will Smith's production and multimedia company Westbrook. So apparently he still got his company and all that. Even though I did hear that Will had resigned from the Academy, so I do wonder that his movies become to the and if they win any awards, whether that means that they can't win the award since he's resigned. But I'm thinking the two are separate. It's the business versus the person and all of that. But I was just seeing some of those numbers. I was going, that's a lot of Benjamins.
Well, Mark, see, the problem when you sell out to corporate America, okay, you literally sold out to corporate America. All the innovation, I hate to say it kind of stops. In other words, if you want to develop new programs, you want to do this, you want to treat people like that, it all stops. And corporate America comes in with their little umbrellas, and they basically dictate how everything's going to be done on a going forward basis. So I was really impressed that Zuckerberg did not sell out to corporate America. In other words, he continued developing Facebook using innovation. But then he reaches a plateau, which I think he is right now, which is one reason I don't.
Well, this Meyer guy gave us some good advice, and he gave some good things that he said, because apparently he said he's trying to replicate Disney's strategy of acquiring and building strong IP and franchise brands while remaining independent of any streaming platform or distributor. Our mission is to have fantastic intellectual properties that are franchises. That's the operating model we've used from our Disney days, he said, that really works in 3 specific areas as an audience. The audience can be spoken to on streaming services. We can speak to that audience and engage that audience on social medias. And you want to have commerce. By the way, Nick, we've got to get some commerce as well. But this is where he said that was very much related to us. He said the demand for content is going to continue to grow extremely robustly over the next 5 to 10 years. If you're independent, there's not a huge amount of quality independent products, so we like our chances there. So we like our chances just like Candle does as well, because he's saying that there is a very much of a need for it in this market.
Well, even that thing we're doing with Duke University, assuming we get it done, which is a classical music piped in show, okay, through Baldwin Auditorium, which is really a great theater. It's like Carnegie Hall. And our analysis shows only Carnegie Hall, the Chicago Symphony, and the London Symphony actually have an internet piped in music. Let me tell you something.
And maybe Lincoln in DC.
Lincoln in DC. Okay, it's very few. But see, even doing that, if you took that whole thing to corporate America, they would go, what? Because I talked to the president of CBS. It's always, what is the ratings? How much money you're going to make? In other words, the money thing becomes the first thing. In other words, it's like money, not did you do something that helps a lot of people, which is to deliver a beautiful classical music show. You know, it's like that's not the priority. The priority is how to make money all the time, and they just drive me nuts, you know, because the thing is, and classical music, well, it will never get a big enough following, so they quash it and out the door it goes. You know, and it's same thing that I think Mark Thimig has experienced in esports years ago. Esports was considered you're not going to get a big audience, and hence corporate America just didn't take it on. But a lot of the small companies, like here we have Epic Games. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They're in Cary, Mark. They're huge. They literally bought the Cary Mall, 100 million square foot mall, and now turned it into the headquarters of Epic Games, which is a big esports network here in Cary, North Carolina. But the thing is, corporate America, they're not interested in that. They're always buying yesterday's story. So it's really difficult to work with. That's all I can say.
If you look at also to your point, Nick, you you look at Microsoft's purchase of Blizzard, $68.7 billion.
Activision, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's stunning. But I think this is a very classic thing in many industries where you've got early stage innovators
Right.
that have very really good management organizations that are flexible and risk taking and all of those. A certain number of those organizations make it, usually a smaller percentage.
Right.
A lot of them blow up on the way, but those that make it ultimately become the target for the bigger guys who
Sure.
didn't have the innovation, didn't have the really the will to enter the space until it arrived at a certain level that would be of interest to them and to their overall corporation.
Right. Right.
And I think one of the things that I've certainly seen in my years that companies usually, and it's been said, and I guess Bill would have a good view on this, is that most acquisitions don't work.
Right. Right.
And so it remains to be seen if large corporations have understood yet that you can't bring this baby into your bigger culture. You need to allow it to be separate and function in the way it's been functioning, and allow it to leverage off the bigger corporation, the channels and abilities and resources that the bigger corporation can have, but not to suffocate the smaller corporation. Because even as big as Blizzard is in the game industry, it's a speck when you look at the size of Microsoft. So Microsoft can easily destroy everything that they're buying and doing if they don't handle this thing properly. But Bill, what's your thought on acquisitions like this too?
Yeah, it's the cultural problem of integration is significant. That's for sure. But look how Warren Buffett does it. He'll buy a company and he'll leave the management in place. You're going to work for me, but I'm not going to micromanage you. I look at examples from General Electric, on the other hand. They're getting into they got into areas prior to the current president that there were just cultural clashes that they have to be unwound. So conglomerates have their dangers, but the Buffett way, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, along that line, when I was with AutoNation, and I was I was employee number one on the new car side in AutoNation, which is now a over $20 billion corporation that Wayne Huizinga had founded, and Steve Berard. And one of the things that we learned very early in our acquisition process, and in our first 3 years, we grew that company from 250 million to 20 billion largely through acquisition.
That's right.
We bought 400 automotive franchises. Originally, we thought, well, we're going to corporatize those, and that's going to improve our performance, and that's going to improve our results. And you know what? We abandoned that strategy very, very early on. And a lot of our deals were designed around keeping that local dealer involved in that business, because we learned how important that whole culture was. That dealer had developed with his own personality and his own activities and all of that, because of course, culture, you can't just change it and expect different results overnight. So where we had top performing dealers, we did everything we could to keep them in place, and that made a much more successful operation. And in some cases, we took those dealers and made them like a regional director or regional president over other dealerships, because they were that successful and accomplished at creating cultures that delivered outstanding results. So I personally watched that whole situation develop and was part of the evolution into something that made more sense.
Yeah.
And we did have another award without having a slap, because the Grammys were held yesterday and there was no slap whatsoever in that, even though Trevor did make some jokes about it, because he did say that there was no slap in sight, and keeping people's names out of our mouths was what he said as a joke in reference to some of the other things that Chris had done and all of that. And there were some major winners, including John Batista, who was nominated for 11 Grammys and apparently walked away with about 5 of them. So definitely there was some things going on in the award space today as well that did not involve getting slapped or anything along those lines, but they did give a salute to women working behind the scenes. So it was good seeing that as well. And they honored several of these behind the scenes women that are doing the things, everything from a tour manager for Chris Stapleton to a tour manager for her, and a number of others that were honored as well. Fortunately, two friends of mine that were nominated did not win, that being Reese Palmer and Rob Caballero, I think is his name and everything, but they were for a children's album, and it did not win. It lost, and I think that Pierce Freelon was on that as well, but that did not win, unfortunately. And I think Nina was also nominated for a jazz album that also did not look like it got the victory this time. But hey, you were nominated, and that's a victory in and of itself, and all of that. So big shout out to those people and the many others that either won or were nominated for the Grammys held recently.
You know who won that slap that was heard around the world is Chris Rock.
Yes,
He's sold out in Boston. They added extra days. He's getting huge attendance. And this goes back to the principle, turn the other cheek. Next year, he should say, hey, you did this cheek. Come on, do this one this time. Because
he's not the only one that won. Well. He's not the only one that won. Have you heard, because I heard figures recently as to the price increase that has happened since that slap. So I was talking to somebody and they said that something like maybe in the neighborhood of 200 to 300% price raises. So some of these tickets are now higher because of what has gone on. And of course, that means that you can charge more as well. So some of the venues are also winning because of the slap, because they are now charging more. And I'm sure his management is not arguing with that either, since they probably increased his cost also.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, also it gets to the two things we discussed: conflict resolution, which some of our world leaders, especially this guy Putin, needs to engage in, and the other thing is anger management. Everybody experiences road rage. I've learned to train myself, rather than give anybody a finger, actually wave to the person when I'm road rage. I've trained myself, because there's really nothing you can do. Somebody's being a jerk on the road, I just wave to them like that, and that's all I do, and then I'm kind of done. But that, I think that's where anger management can really help people. And I think who's this guy, Will Smith, really needs to engage in a little bit of anger management course. I also believe his response, he's seeking counseling, because his response was, I'm resigning from the academy, probably didn't come from him. He probably talked to somebody who gave him that move on the chessboard, saying, look, you're in a heap of trouble here, buddy. Best thing to do is to apologize to everybody, including Chris Rock. And the best thing to do, resign from the academy. I believe he didn't do it so sponte. He did it because he was receiving some good advice. Lawyers, as you know, we make a lot of our money on conflicts. Not so much on conflict resolution by conflicts, but seriously, half the legal profession, I don't work in that half anymore, but half of it is made because people are engaged in fighting. In other words, whether you're fighting with an insurance company, you're fighting with your spouse, you're fighting with somebody, there's a fight going on. Okay, that's where lawyers make money. Now I'm finishing up my CLE classes, and I got to take these classes. What I didn't know is 33% of the legal profession suffers from alcoholism. I had no idea, because I don't engage in that stuff anymore. What they call civil and criminal law, where you're in court all the time. Because frankly, I found it kind of distasteful when I did it. Gosh, now it goes back 35 years ago. It was real stressful, you know. But what I didn't know is the people that are in that profession right now, a lot of them are going to Alcoholics Anonymous, where they're engaged in they're alcoholics, where they're really suffering depression, or they hate what they do for a living. But if you think about it, think about it. Here's what you're going to do for a living, Bill. You're going to be sitting in between two spouses who are going to be arguing all the time, and that's how you're going to make your living. Well, maybe you'll do it 1 year, and that's cool. Then maybe you'll do it 2. But after 3 or 4 years, it really probably gets tiring on these people. And the only reason they can't get out, they know no other way to make a living except listening to people complain.
But speaking of conflict resolution, I know we're getting ready to wind down and everything, but what happens when you're doing something that is positive or you think is positive and somebody else has done something similar, so y'all might have a conflict resolution happening. And I did not realize that that's what they were referring to when I was watching the women's championship game yesterday. But apparently there is a woman basketball player. She was the star of the game, and she's got her own clothing line, and I think that she said the name of the clothing line is Anything is Possible. And then I was hearing the commentator say that Kevin Garnett was going to be buying a lot of these clothes. And what I didn't realize is that the reason he might be buying a lot of these clothes is because he has a movie or a documentary about him, or that involves him, that is also called Anything is Possible. So that being said, I was wondering, from a legal standpoint, could that be a problem and a conflict resolution case that also needs to happen as well? Because apparently this whole documentary is around some of Kevin Garnett's history and some of that, and it's a biopic. But apparently this woman has come up with her own clothing line. So it's one is clothing, one is films. They have the same name though, so that could be a conflict that could happen if one of them decides to take on the other one. I'm thinking that Kevin would probably take on her since she's lesser. But what are your thoughts about that?
As I say in the legal profession, Mark, your best client is a rich guy in a lot of trouble. Okay, that's your best client. So somebody who's really got into it. But there are books out there that are helpful besides Bill Denko's book, which is Richer Than a Millionaire and The Millionaire Next Door, which are great books everybody should read. But there's also How to Win Friends, Influence People. Okay, The Power of Positive Thinking. And my mentor, when I first got into legal practice, I thought he was going to tell me about all these tax books I should read because starting a tax law practice. He said, no, you want to read How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Power of Positive Thinking, and Think and Grow Rich. None of those three were ever recommended to me in my 10 years of college. And I'm sitting going, you've got to be kidding me. But and then The Magic of Thinking Big. Okay, but he was right. Those were the books that you needed to read, but your college professors never told you about.
They don't tell you about that. They don't tell you about how to start your own business. They don't tell you any of this stuff. They don't have any of these courses that they should be having. They should have more of those courses.
How to start your own business. They had one book I read because I started right after I graduated my own law practice. So I've been unemployed for 38 years, owning my own practice. And there was only one book, How to Go into Practice, your own law practice without missing a meal. And I actually read that one because it was really hard, because you're trained in law school to go get a job with a law firm. Okay. However, in 1984, there were no jobs. People don't realize that. The unemployment was high. It was over 10%. Interest rates were over 10%. And so my choice was working at $5.50 an hour, which is what I did, Bill, teaching at University of Denver Law School as an instructor. My salary is $5.50 an hour, which didn't seem to cut it even back then. Or start your own practice. What are you going to do? So I jumped into the private practice.
It's about time for us to wrap up and everything. By the way, I did notice that you were watching one of our newer shows, which is about bullying. So definitely Stephanie Hogney and her son definitely were wanting to thank you for watching and saying that they will be doing this regularly on Sundays, talking about bullying and what goes on with bullying.
And see, that's a great show, Mark. It's a show on bullying. No major network's going to pick that up. So we're picking it up for our network. And I thought that's pretty cool. But you're right. We're past the hour. So we do want to thank our audience around the world for attending the media, especially our friends in Ukraine that are on all the time. And they know how to speak English there. What can I say? And we'll see you next week on the media.